Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah. Sallallahu sallam wa barak ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Amma ba'd. So we're still in chapter number 55 with regards to the concept of zuhd, its importance, its virtue, and its status. And the recommendation, not everything is always obligatory. There is a level which is obligatory, but the general recommendation for the Muslim to take as little as he or she can from the hayatul dunya, and to suffice yourself with the least amount that you possibly can. That's recommended and that's preferred. Taking more, enjoying, benefiting, utilizing other things which are halal, tayyib, lawful from the dunya is not haram. Some instances could be recommended. But the general concept of the worthlessness of this world, and that the Muslim in this dunya should be like a traveler. And obviously a traveler has needs. There are things that you need while you travel. You have to eat, you have to drink, you have to sleep, you have to relieve yourself, you have to take a rest. It's transit, but the traveler doesn't move like a resident. The most luxurious hotel cannot compare to your home. The things that you have in the hotel are going to be for a hotel: a bed, a sink, okay, a microwave, a refrigerator, an ironing board and iron, etc., etc. Okay, that there are things that you do have to have in the dunya. You have to clothe yourself. You have to pay your bills. You have to take care of your family. Okay, things that are necessary. But the Muslim should never lose track or never lose sight of the fact that you're only supposed to take what you need, not too much more. And the moment that you boggle yourself down, you load up too much, you become heavy and slow. And you forget your purpose as a traveler. Khairan. So we mentioned the ayat from the Quran Kareem that the author, Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala, that he had quoted. Okay? Those ayat that he quoted from the Quran Kareem regarding this. طيب. Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala, he then says, وَأَمَّا الْأَحَادِيثُ فَأَكْثَرُ مِنْ أَن تُحْصَرَ فَنُنَبِّهُ بِطَرَفٍ مِنْهَا عَلَى مَا سِوَاهَا. He says, as far as the hadiths, then they are too many. You can't count them. The times which the Prophet ﷺ spoke on zuhd and the zahideen, or the zuhad. And he spoke on the virtue of the hereafter, the dispraise of this world, the worthliness of this world, okay? The transient nature, the temporary nature, the fragile nature of this hayatul dunya, the treacherous nature of the dunya, all right? There are too many hadiths in which the Prophet ﷺ spoke on this, and this goes to show is that this chapter is a major Islamic concept, a major aspect of the deen. No doubt about that. Something that the Prophet ﷺ spoke on abundantly, frequently, and in different types, different styles, different manners, proves that that thing has a tremendous status. Khairan inshallah. He says, فَنُنَبِّهُ. He says, so therefore we will point out, we will mention some things, we'll bring some things to your attention, which will lead you to understanding and comprehending the other hadiths. Meaning, from one thing, learning 10,000 things. From one thing, you learn 10,000 other things. I show you 3 moves or techniques, and that should allow you to utilize in the practice and to learn 20 other moves and techniques. Understand? If you can handle 1, 2, 3, you can handle 4 through 20. Bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. I'll show you how to operate. All right? Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala, first hadith. And it's hadith number 461 in this version. He says, عن عمرو بن عوف الأنصاري رضي الله عنه أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم بعث أبا عبيدة بن الجراح رضي الله عنه إلى البحرين يأتي بجزيتها فقدم بمال من البحرين فسمعت الأنصار بقدوم أبي عبيدة فوافوا صلاة الفجر مع رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فلما صلى رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم انصرف فتعرضوا له فتبسم رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم حين رآهم ثم قال أظنكم سمعتم أن أبا عبيدة قدم بشيء من البحرين فقالوا أجل يا رسول الله فقال أبشروا وأملوا ما يسركم فوالله ما الفقر أخشى عليكم ولكني أخشى أن تبسط الدنيا عليكم كما بسطت على من كان قبلكم فتنافسها كما تنافسها فتهلككم كما أهلكتكم متفق عليه أو كما أهلكتهم متفق عليه. So the first narration is reported by Amr ibn Auf radiallahu anhu al-Ansari. Amr ibn Auf, he says here that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam sent Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Jarrah to Bahrain. And what's meant by Bahrain in this hadith, it says in the footnotes, اسم جامع لبلاد على ساحل بحر الهندي بين البصرة وعمان. That it doesn't necessarily mean the country that's known today as Bahrain. Okay, but Bahrain, he says, ismun jami' is a comprehensive term for the whole entire sector, section, and region ala sahili Bahr al-Hind, on the coast of the Indian Ocean between Basra and Oman. And there are many other countries like Yemen. Yemen in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, some scholars say it doesn't necessarily mean just the Yemen today exclusively, but it's that which is on the right side of the Kaaba, Mecca, Yemen, and that area. Okay, and there are other different locations and regions that have general names and titles. Obviously, geography 100 years ago is not like geography now. Palestine, for example, 100 years ago, there was no this and there was no that. Israel, for example, okay, West Bank, Gaza Strip, etc. 200 years ago, 300 years ago, 500 years ago, Prussia. Is there a country now that is called Prussia? Okay, Poland being on or off of the map, right? The concept of what was considered Persia, okay? When did the names and the terms of these different countries come about? Afghanistan. Was it called that 500 years ago? All right, let alone 1400 years ago, okay? Specifically the Gulf, whether you call it the Arabian Gulf or the Persian Gulf, etc., politics, and how different countries formed or were formed and formulated. Kuwait, Bahrain, Oman, Yemen, so on and so forth. It wasn't necessarily like that back then, okay? Bahrain was used for general section. Yemen could have been used for general section, let alone some countries with those names didn't actually exist independently. There was no Bangladesh back then. There's no such thing as Pakistan back then. It didn't exist. There was no such thing as Pakistan or Bangladesh. Okay? Rather, the Hind, India, East, West, so on and so forth, right? It's not a geography lesson, but you get the point I'm trying to make. And that's important, understanding the hadiths properly. Understanding the hadiths properly. All right? Maghrib. Back then, not in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, afterwards, it wasn't necessarily just Morocco. North Africa, Maghrib. Anything west, okay? Spain, Portugal, etc. Wallahu a'lam. Moving forward. So, the Messenger of Allah ﷺ, he sent Abu Ubaidah ibn Jarrah to Bahrain. And he was to collect the poll tax, or he was to collect the land tax, the jizya that the people had to pay. So he returned to Medina, and the Ansar, they heard of the arrival of Abu Ubaidah. He was coming back with a lot of money, with a lot of goods, exotic goods, jewels, rubies, silks, gold, etc. Goods, a lot of wealth, okay? So the Ansar, they heard of Abu Ubaidah's arrival, and Abu Ubaidah, he came to Medina approximately the time of Salat al-Fajr. So the Messenger of Allah sallallahu everything was finished. فَتَعَرَّضُوا لَهُ, and they turned towards him. Okay, the Messenger of Allah and the Ansar, they made eye contact, they looked at each other, and the Messenger of Allah sallallahu he smiled. Tabassama. He smiled at them when he saw them. And he said, I believe that you guys know that Abu Ubaidah is coming back from Bahrain. Is that the case? He laughed, he smiled. He had intuition. He knew what they were anxious and what they were expecting. So the Ansar, they said, yes, O Messenger of Allah. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, be happy, abshiru, have glad tidings. Don't worry, don't be sad, don't be afraid, don't fear, because it's not poverty that I fear upon you. I'm not scared and I'm not afraid that you'll be poor and that you'll be needy. He said, rather, I fear that the worldly life will be given to you. And I fear that the dunya, he says, tubsata. The dunya will spread its hands out towards you like it was to the previous nations. And therefore you will fight and you will compete just as they fought and just as they had competed with each other. And thus it will destroy you as it had destroyed them. And this hadith is collected by Imam al-Bukhari and collected by Imam Muslim. And the lesson from the hadith is crystal clear. Crystal clear is that money and the misuse of money, the greed of money, fighting, scratching, clawing, conniving, backstabbing each other for power, for status, for control, for wealth, for beauty, that's the biggest danger to the Muslims, not necessarily poverty. Oftentimes when the Muslims don't have much, their unity is better. They stick together, they know each other, the community is more closely knitted. But when you open up a masjid, he opens up a masjid, you get money, you get knowledge, you get a building, you get real estate, you get this next. We see what we have today, in which the Muslims are so far apart, so spread apart at each other's throats. Everyone wants a bigger house, wants more money, wants more status, wants more power, wants more control. وَلَا حَوْلَ وَلَا قُوَّةَ إِلَّا بِاللَّهِ. The next narration, وعن أبي سعيد الخدري رضي الله عنه قال جلس رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم على المنبر وجلسنا حوله فقال إن مما أخاف عليكم من بعدي ما يفتح عليكم من زهرة الدنيا وزينتها متفق عليه. Abu Sa'id al-Khudri narrates that one day the Messenger of Allah صلى الله عليه وسلم sat upon the minbar and we sat around him on the floor. And he said, from that which I fear upon you is the beauty, the goods, the glitter, the glamour, the gold of the hayat dunya to be given to you. All right, that's what I'm afraid of. And this hadith is collected by Imam al-Bukhari and collected by Imam Muslim. And this hadith is a proof of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's message and his prophecy, his messengership, his prophethood. Whereas the Muslims, whether it be the Middle East or other parts of the Muslim lands, have become extremely wealthy, extremely affluent. Okay, all types of different things have been given to the Muslims, right? وعنه أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال إن الدنيا حلوة خضرة وأن الله تعالى مستخلفكم فيها فينظروا كيف تعملون فاتقوا الدنيا واتقوا النساء. Also, Abu Sa'id al-Khudri narrated that the Messenger of Allah صلى الله عليه وسلم said, indeed, the life of this world is sweet and green. It's sweet and it's green. And indeed, Allah Azza wa Jalla will give you succession in the land. Allah will make you leaders. You'll have your turn, you'll have your chance to be in charge. And Allah will see and He will look that which you will do, your deeds. So fear the worldly life and be afraid of women. And this hadith is collected by Imam Muslim. The scholars of Islam, they say, hulwa, meaning in taste. Khadira, meaning in vision. Meaning that hayat dunya is green and sweet, sweet and green. It encapsulates you. The worldly life feels good, smells good, tastes good, sounds good. If you think about it, having money, having power, okay? All five senses, even the sixth sense, enjoys pleasure, okay? It's like a restaurant, okay? A first class, high class restaurant isn't just about the food, it's about the ambiance. The moment you step in the restaurant, rather the valet parking, everything is attacking all of your senses. And the food that's presented to you, the smell of the food, the taste of the food, how the food looks. Is this not the case? Rather, there's certain sounds that they employ against you in the restaurant. The cracked pepper, okay? Or you go to certain restaurants, they're cooking in front of you, and you hear it sizzling. So it's taste, smell, feel, everything is for you to have a total experience. And that's the similarity of the hayat dunya. It is appealing, it calls to you, it pulls you, it's attractive. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to give everyone their turn. Everyone is going to have their chance of leadership and of shining and glory. And once Allah gives you your chance, Allah will see what you do. It's your turn now. You complained about these brothers, you complained about these leaders, you complained about this imam. Tafaddal. Now you have the floor. What are you going to do? What numbers are you going to put up? The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, "Fattaqu dunya." Be afraid, be scared. Don't say that, oh, I can handle it. Oh, the dunya isn't that bad. oh, they're kuffar, they're nasty, that woman, she's nasty, she's dirty, she's a kafirah. It's not a fitna to me. The kuffar women, they aren't attractive to me. No. Fattaqud dunya, be scared. The dunya has destroyed, it has ripped to pieces, it has ruined many people who came before you that were better than you, smarter than you, stronger than you. Wattaqun nisa, and be afraid of women. Obviously, the natural attraction towards the opposite sex. Be afraid of schemes, plots, scandals of women. Be afraid of a man becoming weak in front of a woman. Okay, the concept of a man can't tell a woman no, whether that's his wife or whether that's his daughter. He can't tell them no. It hurts him to tell his young daughter no. It hurts him to tell his wife to fear Allah, to enforce the rules. You can't go outside dressed like that. She's going to get upset. She's going to get mad. She's going to expose my sins to the brothers. Okay, she's going to say, well, a couple years ago, you didn't have a beard. You weren't now you're telling me that I can't dress like this? Well, what about such and such? Do the brothers in the masjid, do they know this or not? Let's be mindful of that. So oftentimes, a tough, strong, intelligent, wise man becomes weak in front of a woman. That's a reality of life. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, مَا رَأَيْتُ مِن نَاقِصَاتِ عَقْلٍ وَدِينٍ أَذْهَبَ لِلُبِّ رَجُلٍ حَازِمٍ مِنْ إِحْدَاكُنَّ. He says, I've never seen a man who's resolute, hazim, not a weak-willed man, a weak-minded, a simpleton. He says hazim, a strong-minded man. I've never seen his mind diverted and taken away quicker than by one of you women. And these women are naqisat aqlin wa dinin, who have religion and intellect which is lacking. He said this, I've never seen a man lose track, lose focus, lose concentration faster than in front of a woman. All right, and if you just think about the world today, you think about the different distractions, and you think about one of the wisdoms of segregation in school. How you going to study and focus on class when there's a woman in front of you, an attractive, appealing girl in your classroom? You can't study, you can't focus because you're thinking about impressing them. Sports, think about the sports culture. How many people, they don't make it to the league, they don't get drafted. They don't take sports serious because of their girlfriend, because they have to buy Pampers, they have a baby, and the list goes on and on and on and on. If you think about how a man who's tough and big and strong and smart and knowledgeable, but oftentimes is weak and feeble-minded in front of a what? In front of a woman. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ tells us about 7 types of people who will receive Allah's shade on the day in which there's no shade but Allah's shade. And from them, the Prophet ﷺ says, وَرَجُلٌ دَعَتْهُ امْرَأَةٌ ذَاتُ مَنْصَبٍ وَجَمَالٍ فَقَالَ إِنِّي أَخَافُ اللَّهِ. And that is a man who's invited, who's seduced by a beautiful and powerful woman. And he says, I fear Allah. The reason why that reward is so high, so special, because 9 out of 10 men won't have the power to say no. 9 out of 10 men, they can't resist any woman, let alone that to mansib. She has money, she has political power, she's a queen, she's a princess, she's an ambassador, she's royal. You may be from the peasant stock. So a high woman reaching down and say, come you. And then on top of all of that, she's what? She's gorgeous. Drop that gorgeous. She's beautiful. The average man, he can't stop. Okay? And the only thing that prevents this man is not shame or fear or embarrassment. The only thing that stops him from making zina with this woman is that he fears Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Think about that now. How many people would fall into zina if it wasn't for they're afraid of their wives, or afraid of getting exposed? They're afraid of being shamed. But just the raw fear of Allah is the only thing that stops me. Think how rare that is. All right, and we go on and on, speaking on the hayat dunya and speaking on the fitna of nisa with regards to men. وعنه أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال إن الدنيا حلوة خضرة إلى أن قال وعن أنس رضي الله عنه أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال اللهم لا عيش إلا عيش الآخرة متفق عليه. Anas radiallahu anhu narrated that the Prophet ﷺ said, oh Allah, there is no life except for that of the hereafter. Allahumma la aisha illa aisha al-akhirah. The true life, the real life is not now, but it's only then. And that is in Bukhari and Muslim. وعنه عن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أنه قال يتبع الميت 3 أهله وماله وعمله فيرجع اثنان ويبقى واحد يرجع أهله وماله ويبقى عمله متفق عليه. Anas radiallahu anhu also narrated in Bukhari Muslim that when the deceased goes to the graveyard, three things will follow him: his family, his wealth, and his deeds. Two things will forsake him, one thing will remain with him. His family will go back, his wealth will go back, and the only thing that will stay with him is his deeds. وعنه قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يؤتى بأنعم أهل الدنيا من أهل النار يوم القيامة فيصبغ في النار صبغة ثم يقال يا ابن آدم هل رأيت خيرا قط؟ هل مر بك نعيم قط؟ فيقول لا والله يا رب. ويؤتى بأشد الناس بؤسا في الدنيا من أهل الجنة فيصبغ صبغة في الجنة فيقال له يا ابن آدم هل رأيت بؤسا قط؟ هل مر بك شدة قط؟ فيقول لا والله ما مر بي بؤس قط ولا رأيت شدة قط. رواه مسلم. Anas radiallahu anhu also narrated that on the day of judgment, the wealthiest man will be brought forth. The most luxurious, wealthiest person that you can think of, he will be brought. And he will be placed, he will be dipped into the fire for a brief period of time, a moment. Allah will throw him in the fire and then he will be taken out. And it will be said to him, O son of Adam, have you ever seen any goodness? Have you ever seen any luxury, anything soft, sweet, something smells good? Have you ever seen anything of khair, of na'im? And the son of Adam, he would say, no, Allah, no, I have never seen anything ever positive in my life. And the poorest man will be brought on the day of judgment. Think about someone who's poor, the poorest person you can think of. Someone who has nothing. He doesn't have clothes to wear on his back. Not someone who's struggling from check to check, someone who lives in the slums, shanty towns, ghettos, someone who has nothing. The poorest person you can think about. He'll be brought on the day of judgment, and Allah will place him into Jannah for a short period of time. He'll be dipped, he'll be placed in Jannah, and then taken out briefly. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he will address him, saying, O son of Adam, have you ever seen a hardship? Have you ever had any tough, difficult times? Have you ever seen anything miserable, any suffering? And that servant, he would say, no, O Allah, I've never seen anything hard. I've never seen any suffering in my life. And this hadith is collected by Imam Muslim. It's definitely a heart-softening hadith. If you think about it, how all of the pleasures of this dunya will be forgotten from one quick trip to the hellfire. Let alone someone who's going to hellfire for as long as Allah wills them to be. Waliyadhu billah. And you think about all of the hard times, depression, sadness, loneliness, lack of money, lack of life, all of the pain in this hayat dunya will be immediately forgotten just by a person being or giving a small taste of Jannah, let alone being in Jannah for eternity. So this hadith is something that you should always remind yourself of when it comes to the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and sacrificing for Allah's sake. All of the pain and the agony, it's all temporary. It's going to go away. Sit down and tell your nafs, there's no point in worrying about it. Just keep doing what you need to do. And all of the suffering in this hayat dunya, just think about it. It's all going to be forgotten for the believer that goes to Jannah. Think if we just put this hadith on our minds on a daily basis, we wouldn't be weak, we wouldn't fall into temptation, we wouldn't become victims of the things that people become victims of in this hayat dunya. Is that the pain is temporary and the pleasure, the laughter, the enjoyment is temporary. Allahumma musta'an. We'll stop here today, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala surely knows best.